Michael had spent years working as a wildlife conservationist, but nothing could have prepared him for what he found that day. The dense African savanna stretched endlessly before him, golden grass swaying in the warm breeze. He had been tracking signs of poachers for weeks, following whispers of illegal activity deep in the reserve. But he hadn't expected to stumble upon something so heartbreaking. A tiny lion cub, barely a few weeks old, lying motionless in the dirt. Michael's breath caught as he knelt beside the fragile creature. Its fur was matted with dust, its ribs visible beneath its thin skin. It looked weak, too weak to even lift its head. But as he reached out, its eyes flickered open, just barely, filled with fear and pain. His stomach twisted. He knew what had happened. Poachers had slaughtered the cub's mother, likely for her fur or bones, leaving this helpless creature behind. It was a cruel tactic, killing the adult lions and abandoning the cubs, knowing they wouldn't survive on their own. Michael clenched his fists, anger burning through him. He had seen the destruction poachers left behind before, but it never got easier. The cub let out a weak, pitiful whimper. Michael's resolve hardened. "You're not dying here." A desperate rescue. He carefully lifted the tiny lion into his arms, feeling its frail body tremble against his chest. It barely weighed anything. Michael radioed his team. "I found an orphaned cub. He's in bad shape. I need transport now." As he carried the cub back toward the vehicle, he whispered softly, "You're going to be okay, little one, I promise." The cub didn't understand the words, but somehow its tiny body relaxed against him. Back at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, the real fight began. The cub, whom Michael named Leo, was critically weak. He refused to eat at first, too traumatized to trust the humans trying to help him. Michael refused to give up. He stayed by Leo's side for hours, gently feeding him with a syringe, keeping him warm, whispering reassurances. Slowly, day by day, Leo began to trust him. The once frightened cub started recognizing Michael's voice, perking up whenever he entered the room. He would nuzzle into Michael's chest, seeking warmth and comfort. And then, one day, the miracle happened. Leo let out his first tiny roar. Michael laughed, tears burning in his eyes. It was small, more of a squeak than a roar. But it was proof that Leo was fighting to live. From that moment on, their bond was unbreakable. But Michael always knew one truth. Leo wasn't meant to stay in captivity forever. One day, he would have to return to the wild. What Michael didn't know was that fate would bring them back together again, in a way that would leave him in tears. Leo wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. Under Michael's care, the once fragile cub transformed into a strong, confident young lion. His golden coat grew sleek, his body filled out with muscle, and his once timid gaze became sharp and alert. But through it all, one thing never changed: his bond with Michael. Every morning, when Michael arrived at the rehabilitation center, Leo would greet him with playful pounces, rubbing his head against Michael's chest in a display of affection. Even as he grew bigger, much bigger, he never stopped acting like the same tiny cub Michael had rescued. Michael laughed one day as Leo knocked him over, pinning him to the ground with massive paws. "You have no idea how big you are, do you?" Leo only responded by nuzzling into him, his deep purr vibrating through Michael's chest. It was unlike anything the team had ever seen. "He sees you as his family," one of the caretakers observed. "You saved him. You raised him. To Leo, you're more than just a human. You're his father." Michael swallowed the lump in his throat. He had known from the beginning that this day would come. Leo wasn't meant to stay here. He was a wild animal, born to roam the savanna, to lead a pride, to rule the land as a king. Keeping him in captivity wasn't an option, but letting him go, that was going to be the hardest thing Michael had ever done. The day of Leo's release arrived faster than Michael had expected. The team had carefully chosen a protected reserve, a vast, untouched land where Leo could roam freely, safe from poachers and human interference. Michael rode in the transport truck with Leo, his heart heavy. Leo, now fully grown, sat calmly beside him, unaware that this was their last ride together. Michael reached out, running a hand through his thick mane. "You're ready for this, big guy." His voice was steady, but his heart ached. Leo leaned into the touch, his massive golden eyes locking onto Michael's. A silent understanding passed between them. Michael had saved Leo when he had no one. Now he had to set him free. When they arrived at the reserve, the gate of the transport cage was opened. Leo hesitated for only a moment before stepping forward, sniffing the air, taking in the vastness of his new home. Then he ran. Michael watched, his chest tight, as Leo disappeared into the wild, his powerful muscles rippling beneath the golden sun. Tears burned in his eyes. Leo was home. But as much as Michael wanted to believe this was the end of their story, fate had other plans. Because years later, when they met again, Leo's reaction would leave Michael in tears. Time passed, and Michael often thought about Leo. Though his work kept him busy rescuing and rehabilitating other animals, nothing compared to the bond he had shared with that lion cub. Releasing Leo had been the hardest thing he'd ever done, but he knew it was the right choice. Still, he wondered, was Leo okay? Had he adapted to the wild? Had he found a pride? Did he even remember the man who had once saved his life? Michael tried to keep up with the reports from the reserve where Leo had been released. Rangers occasionally spotted a large, dominant male patrolling the territory, keeping rival lions at bay. They believed it was Leo. But Michael had no way of knowing for sure, until fate brought them back together in the most unexpected way. Years after Leo's release, Michael received an urgent call. Poachers had been spotted near the reserve. Some lions had already been targeted, and the rangers were requesting Michael's expertise to help track and protect the remaining prides. Michael didn't hesitate. He boarded a plane that same night, his heart pounding at the thought of returning to the place where he had said goodbye to Leo. Would he recognize the land? Would he recognize him? A shocking encounter. The first few days in the reserve were tense. Michael and the rangers worked tirelessly, monitoring the lions, making sure none had fallen victim to poaching. Then, one afternoon, while patrolling a familiar stretch of land, Michael's breath caught in his throat. A massive lion stood in the distance. Michael didn't need a ranger to tell him. He knew. It was Leo. His mane had grown thicker, darker, a sign of maturity and dominance. His body was even more powerful than Michael remembered, his golden coat shimmering under the sun. He wasn't the fragile cub Michael had once cradled in his arms. Leo was now a king. Michael barely dared to breathe as Leo locked eyes with him. Would he run? Would he see Michael as a stranger? Michael took a cautious step forward, his heart hammering. Then, Leo moved, not away, toward him. Michael froze, stunned, as the massive lion slowly approached. And then, in a moment that left Michael in tears, Leo did something no one expected. He nuzzled his massive head against Michael's chest. It was a gesture of pure love, pure trust, the same way he had done when he was a tiny, helpless cub. Michael choked back a sob, running his hands through Leo's thick mane. "You remember me," he whispered. Leo let out a low, rumbling purr. Years had passed, but their bond, unbreakable. Michael stood frozen, his hands buried in Leo's thick mane, his heart pounding with disbelief. He had imagined this moment countless times, but never had he expected Leo to remember him like this. Not just as a familiar presence, but as family. The massive lion pressed his forehead gently against Michael's chest, the same way he had done as a cub seeking comfort. Michael swallowed hard, fighting back tears. He wasn't just standing before a wild lion, he was standing before Leo, the cub he had saved, raised, and set free. The rangers watching from a distance were stunned. "Lions don't do this," one of them murmured. "They don't just remember humans like this." But Leo was different. Michael slowly stepped back, studying Leo's face. His golden eyes were wise, powerful, but still held that same deep trust. It was as if the years apart had never happened. A low, rumbling purr vibrated through Leo's chest, a sound so unexpected from such a powerful creature that it sent chills down Michael's spine. The lion nuzzled him again before circling him, inspecting him like a long-lost friend. Michael laughed, wiping at his eyes. "You've gotten huge, buddy," he whispered. "And you're ruling your land now, aren't you?" Leo lifted his head, his ears twitching at the familiar tone. He let out a deep, throaty exhale. Content, at peace. The rangers, still in awe, hesitated before stepping closer. "This is incredible," one of them said. "He's a fully grown male lion, and he's treating you like pride." Michael knew they were right. Lions didn't just accept humans, let alone embrace them after years apart. This wasn't just recognition. This was something deeper, a bond that time hadn't broken. Then, suddenly, Leo's ears perked. His body tensed. Michael's breath caught. Leo turned his massive head toward the trees, his golden eyes narrowing. A deep growl rumbled from his chest, low and warning. The rangers reacted instantly, scanning the area. "Something's not right," one of them muttered, reaching for his radio. Leo took a step forward, standing protectively in front of Michael. His posture had changed, from affectionate to alert. Michael felt it now, too. Something was out there, a rustling in the distance. Footsteps, too heavy for an animal. Then a sharp snap. Michael's stomach twisted. He knew that sound, a rifle being cocked. Leo's growl turned into a roar, a sound so powerful it shook the air. Michael's blood ran cold. Poachers. And this time they had no idea what they were walking into. Leo wasn't the helpless cub they had left behind. He was the king of this land now. And he wasn't about to let them take anything else from him. Michael's pulse pounded in his ears as Leo's roar shattered the silence. The sound rippled across the savanna, a warning so fierce that even the trees seemed to tremble. The rangers moved fast, signaling to one another as they positioned themselves. They had prepared for this, knowing poachers were in the area, but now, with Leo standing protectively in front of Michael, the situation had shifted. Through the brush, shadowy figures emerged, rifles in hand. 3 men, moving cautiously, but with the arrogance of those who had taken lives before. They hadn't expected to be seen, let alone confronted. And they certainly hadn't expected to come face to face with a lion ready to fight for his land. One of the poachers froze. That's the big one," he muttered. His eyes flicked toward Michael and the rangers, realization dawning. This isn't just any lion. Michael took a step forward, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. "Put your weapons down," he commanded. "You don't belong here." One of the poachers, a man with a deep scar across his cheek, sneered. "And what? You think that thing's going to stop us?" Leo growled, his muscles coiling like a spring. He didn't need to understand their words. He understood threats. Scarred Cheek aimed his rifle. Before he could blink, Leo lunged. The massive lion's roar turned into action, his powerful legs launching him forward. The poachers stumbled back, their false bravado collapsing under pure, primal fear. One man dropped his gun entirely, scrambling for the trees. The others weren't as lucky. Leo was a force of nature. He didn't attack to kill. He didn't need to. One swipe of his massive paw sent Scarcheek's rifle flying. Another man tried to raise his weapon, but Leo's deep, rumbling snarl made his hands shake so violently that he fumbled, dropping the gun. The rangers moved in. Within seconds, the poachers were disarmed, their faces drained of color. They had entered the reserve thinking they would take another trophy. Instead, they had encountered a king defending his kingdom. Michael exhaled, his hands still clenched into fists. His heart was racing, but he knew Leo had never intended to kill. He had simply done what he had always done, protected. The Rangers secured the poachers, calling in backup. Michael turned to Leo, who stood tall, his mane shimmering in the fading sunlight. The lion's golden eyes met his, and for a moment there was understanding. Leo had been left for dead by poachers once. Now, he had made sure they would never hurt anyone again. Michael swallowed the lump in his throat. "You really are incredible, buddy." Leo let out a low, satisfied chuff and nudged his massive head against Michael's chest. It was a silent promise. No matter the years, the distance, or the threats, their bond would never be broken. The poachers were taken away in handcuffs, their weapons confiscated. Their hunt ended before it could even begin. The reserve would press charges, ensuring they would never step foot on protected land again. The Rangers exchanged quiet nods, their relief evident, but Michael barely noticed them. His focus remained on Leo. The lion had returned to his usual stance, powerful yet calm, his golden eyes scanning the savanna as if confirming that the threat was truly gone. The adrenaline was fading, but the connection between them had only grown stronger. Michael had no doubt now. Leo hadn't just remembered him. He had recognized him as family. Michael took a slow step forward, reaching out with steady hands. Leo didn't flinch. He leaned into Michael's touch, his deep purr rumbling through his chest, a sound of trust, of peace. It was as if the years apart had melted away, as if they had never truly been separated. The tiny cub Michael had once cradled had grown into a king, yet in this moment he was still the same Leo. The Rangers watched in awe. They had seen lions interact with their prides, with their cubs, but never had they seen a bond like this, one that defied nature, time, and logic. "You should go," one of them murmured, almost reluctantly. "He's where he belongs now." Michael knew they were right. This wasn't a reunion meant to last forever. Leo had his land, his pride, his purpose. To take him away from that would be selfish. But letting go again, even knowing it was right, was no easier than the first time. Michael exhaled, running a hand through Leo's thick mane one last time. "You're home," he whispered, "and you're safe now." Leo let out a soft huff, stepping back, his golden eyes still locked onto Michael's. There was no sadness, no confusion, just understanding. And then, like a true king, Leo turned and walked away. Michael watched as he disappeared into the tall grass, his massive form blending seamlessly into the wild. His ears flicked once, his tail swished, but he didn't look back. He didn't need to. Michael stood there long after Leo was gone, the weight of the moment settling deep in his chest. The little cub he had saved had not only survived, he had thrived. He had found his place in the world, just as he was meant to, and somehow, knowing that was enough. As Michael climbed back into the ranger's vehicle, he glanced once more at the vast savanna stretching before him. Somewhere out there, Leo roamed freely, ruling his land, forever carrying the unspoken bond they shared. Some connections never fade, some loves never die. And no matter how many years passed, Michael knew one thing for certain: Leo would always be his greatest rescue. Because sometimes the ones we save end up saving us right back. Did this story touch your heart? Hit like and subscribe for more incredible stories of loyalty and survival. And tell us, if you could reunite with any animal from your past, who would it be? Drop your answer in the comments.